Welcome inside another edition of House Guests for today, Wednesday. It's the 7th of, it's the 6th of July, 2022. In a studio with me, Miss Sonia Cazaubon, Vice Chairperson, Suffer Disaster Committee. It's a pleasure to have you here in studio with me. Once again, a special good morning to you.
Good morning, Gabrina, and good morning to all the listeners out there. Oh, I need to remove my mask. Right. Good morning, Gabrina, and good morning to all the listeners out there. It's a pleasure to be here to talk to you all about this topic this morning.
First of all, give us a brief about yourself.
Ooh, okay. Nadia Cazaubon, daughter of Sufre, born and raised up here, went to Sufre Comprehensive and then went outside. I taught for 4 years at Sufre Comprehensive a long time ago in Bethlehem. And I went out to study and I came back, worked at SMMA, and now I'm working with an NGO, which used to be called Caribbean Student Environmental Alliance. But as of last month, we rebranded to Waterways and Waterways Caribbean Branch. So I'm the program director for Waterways Caribbean, and we operate out of St. Lucia, but we do work in other countries in the Caribbean.
Nice. Also, you made mention of Clay Caribbean being rebranded to Waterways. For persons who are not really aware, what is Waterways? You mind sharing with the listening audience?
Okay, so it's Caribbean Sea, not Clear Caribbean. Clear Caribbean is another organization. So Caribbean Student Environmental Alliance was formed in 2004 and registered officially in St. Lucia in 2009. We do environmental education with students, with communities, and we have had a long running set of programs in schools, environmental clubs at schools. You also host annual rainforest camps, and we have one coming up for secondary school and primary school students. We have done snorkeling programs to teach students how to help them form some form of attachment or to get to experience the marine environment for themselves so that they would then take ownership and become stewards of the marine environment. So we take them snorkeling. We teach them how to snorkel. We take them out snorkeling at different sites, and that's our Kids for Coral program. And we we realized a lot of Solutions do not know how to swim, so we had to tailor our program. I see you smiling. Can you swim, Kabrina?
I'm guilty. That's why I use for that expression. Sure.
Yeah, that's a sad fact that we live on an island and a lot of our students, in fact, a lot of the adults as well, do not know how to swim. Solutions will tell you, "Lame apane pies bunch for you chibi." So, so we've had to tailor it and then to include a swimming program, a swimming portion to that as well. But yeah, we rebranded just last month to Waterways because the name Caribbean Student Environmental Alliance sort of misled a few people in what we actually do. It's registered as a nonprofit in the US, so donations and grants that we receive are tax deductible. And we do work in the US as well. And the US branch was having difficulty attracting grants because of the name Caribbean. So a grant agency would say, like, why would I give a Caribbean organization money to do work in, let's say, if it is Tennessee or Florida, when I could give it to a US organization, not realizing that it is actually a US registered organization. And in St. Lucia and in the Caribbean, we've had people think that because it's Caribbean student, that we only work with students, or because a lot of our activities are focused on the sea, that we don't do anything outside of the marine environment, which is not our focus. So we changed the name of the organization. The board decided to do that in 2019, actually, to Waterways. But we were only able to rebrand this year because of COVID. We were supposed to rebrand in 2020 when it was changed in 2019, but we had to rebrand this year. Um, but the Waterways better reflects what we do. We do environmental work um, focusing on water, but we have an approach of going from the source, which would be up in the rainforest, through the river, and then down to the sea. So we're following the water course, we're following the waterway.
Nice and sweet. Following on the recent cleanup program which was held in Castries, you mind sharing it first? How was it received? And I'm hoping, Sophia would have had its own as well.
Oh, yes. So we had, for our rebranding, we had an entire week of activities. And one of them was on the final day, which was the 11th last month, Saturday, where we did a cleanup campaign and we had groups from all districts taking part. And for Sufre, we had the Barons Drive community and the Fishermen's Cooperative Society taking on the responsibility of doing a cleanup. So for Sufre, we were actually able to remove over 1,000 pounds of garbage that was picked up along the coastline in Sufre. It's appalling. It reflects badly on us as residents. We might not be the one littering, but if we live here and we don't do anything about it, we live in that situation. So to remove over 1,000 pounds of garbage on the beach in just one morning, it says a lot. Um, and St. Suferians, St. Lucians need to be mindful because island wide we were able to remove over 4,000 pounds of trash island wide in all our different cleanups. We had some heavier items that we removed in Sufre, which accounted for a lot of the weight. But the item that accounted for um, the majority of all the what we picked up was plastic bottles. A ton of plastic bottles, bags upon bags of just plastic bottles, bottle caps, wrappers. I mean, solutions. We know what's happening. I mean, if you went by the river just before the heavy rains, you would see the mouth of the river had a carpet of plastic bottles. It's us, it's our children, it's our relatives dumping that in the drains or in the river directly or on the on the sidewalk, and that's where it ends up. We need to be more responsible about how we dispose of our garbage.
I can definitely agree. Also, maybe some concern that I may have, not necessarily perhaps improper disposal on the beach itself, but in terms of if the rivers are not being desilted and stuff, those can contribute to it as well. So maybe it has to do with a lot of, proper irrigation, because you look at slope, especially what comes from uphill will affect the downhill pathway and all of that as well. And maybe moving forward in terms of having a lot of sensitization for persons to know the improper practices and maybe have a lot of waste disposal bins and stuff for persons.
Yeah, so you're very correct in that whatever happens upstream ends up in the sea, as Sat coined, tout ça au fait à sous la terre, ou kay senti bon la mer en l'air. So it's an accumulation. What we get on the coastline is an accumulation of what happens throughout the entire watershed, for the entire district. So after Hurricane Thomas, just think back, after Hurricane Thomas, when we had no water, Wasco's pipes were broken all around. People reverted back to traditional sources of water for them to use. Back in the 60s and the 50s, the Sufra River was seen as a resource. On any given day, you would see people in the river by the school, by the primary school, by the behind the hospital. People were there literally washing clothes in the river. The river was clean. The river was not seen as a dumping ground. The same way you would pass through canneries and see people using the river in canneries, the rivers around St. Lucia had the same use. It's only until we had this Bilazia um, episode in St. Lucia that government decided the best way to try to get people to stop using the river was to send out the message that the river is dirty because the Bilazia worm lives in a snail that lives in the water. So if you're walking in the river barefooted and you have a cut, then that worm would can potentially infect you. So the messaging that they got out to try to get people to stop using was that the river was dirty. And from since then, people have had this view that, hey, if it's dirty, then me throwing something is not going to make it any better. So I might as well throw it in there. And that is a wrong attitude. Because after Thomas, like I said, people went back to the river for them to get water to clean, to get water to wash clothes, and to bathe. And I was appalled. I was horrified to walk along by Cots after Hurricane Thomas and to see that people had blocked off the drain by the hydro, collecting water and bathing in that water from a drain, a gutter. So if we do not get our rivers back to its pristine or as close to pristine as possible state for us to use it, we're going to lose it. And we're close to losing it completely. We need to rethink the whole idea as to what purpose a river serves and how it will benefit us and why we need it. So drawing back to littering and things that get dumped in the river, every St. Lucian from the top of the river down through to the mouth of the river needs to take personal responsibility for the water, the ravines, the streams, the waterfalls, whatever it is that is by their property, by their home, where they work, where they pass, need to take personal responsibility for that. Which brings us to our discussion, which is talking about disaster preparedness.
Definitely. And with you as the vice chairperson, we know any and everything has its challenges. Before we get into that, tell us what is the role and the functions of the Sufre Disaster Preparedness Committee?
Okay, so NEMO, the National Emergency Management Organization, has a structure where every community has a district disaster committee. And the district disaster committee is supposed to be the arm, of NEMO in each community. So we're supposed to get the community prepared for any disaster and then to respond. I will not say during a disaster, especially for a hurricane, but immediately after a disaster until the situation returns to normal. And disasters are not only tropical storms or hurricanes, disasters could be an earthquake, a volcanic eruption, storm surge, a mass casualty event, um, tsunami, whatever you can think of that would constitute disaster where you have disruption of lives and livelihoods. Nemo is supposed to respond. So our role is to replicate whatever Nemo as a national organization wants done in each community. So in the preparedness aspect for us as we are in the hurricane season, it is our responsibility to ensure that persons are aware of what they need to do to get themselves, their families, their properties ready for any impact. And I mean, we had a dry run with the tropical system that just went past us and developed into Tropical Storm Bonnie after just before it hit Central America. So we have had a little taste, and this year is predicted to be extremely active in terms of the number of named tropical systems. And I have two prizes to give, so I don't know if you're taking calls, but I will leave them with you. If persons can tell me what's the next name system that the next name up. So far, we've had some systems already named. What is the next name on the list?
Nice. So, persons, if you think you have the answer to that, feel free to give us a call during this discussion. Like anything else, there is always challenges. You mind speaking about a few and how best were you able to overcome? It's not always the easiest thing sometimes with challenges and trying to make things work, especially as it relates to your NGO. We're never ready for a disaster. No one is ever ready for a disaster.
I beg to differ. If you practice, if you have a plan in the event of a disaster, you will know what to do. You'll be prepared to act. It would be better for you to be caught prepared than to be caught unprepared. And I'll give you an example. As we're in this building right now, when I came in, for those of you who might know, I have a little military background. The first thing I did was, and I've been in this building before, where is the exit? If in case anything were to happen, I need to know where do I need to, what direction I need to run for me to get to the exit, for me not to be trapped in any building. That situational awareness, that form of alertness is one aspect of being prepared. So, for your home, for instance, you should have a general idea. If there is a major earthquake, what do you do at your home? You would have a general idea what needs to be done, how you make yourself safe. I mean, Nemo has spent thousands of dollars on ads trying to get people, whether you listen to it and think, yes, I need to do that, or where you just listen to it and be like, whatever. At least you've heard the ads. Especially if there's a tsunami. Everybody in St. Lucia would know what to do if there's a tsunami, right? If you see a tsunami, a high wave, what do you do?
But is it even
Cooey, cooey,
correct
cooey,
here to
right?
say you run and you run uphill? How safe is it when you run uphill? Because remember, with a
You're running
tsunami and the
uphill.
heights and
So
stuff.
if a tsunami, if there's an alert that there's a tsunami approaching St. Lucia, everybody knows that you have to find higher ground. Simple reason
Which is
being
true.
that the high water, the tsunami wave, will not be able to get you if you're the further up you go. So it's for you to escape, save your life, preserve life first, not property in that instance, preserve life to get to as higher ground as possible so that whenever the wave comes in, it would not affect you. You would not be caught up in that tsunami wave. Think of the scenes, the pictures, the videos we saw after the tsunami in Indonesia or in Japan. There's a video I remember seeing where in Japan, there's safe houses or safe spots that are on the tallest points in each community. And there's one video I remember seeing very clearly that people were all streaming, and the stairs, they factored that in. The stairs had about 6 people wide, all running up in sync. And I was rather impressed. I'm like, these Japanese are really, really orderly. Everybody running up in sync. Nobody was tripping and falling down, like one person trying to pull it up down for them to go up faster, that kind of thing. Everybody was running up in sync, 6 people wide abreast, going up the stairs to get to that platform. And when they got there, then you would look over and then see the same place you just ran from. The water is just washing in there, but the community was relatively safe. Those who managed to get to that point were relatively safe at the top of that hill. So as you're sitting right here, if we had to have a tsunami, where's your closest point to run? I mean, Sufre Estate is right there. You run up the Sufre Estate Hill. That's your closest exit point if you have a tsunami. So, you going back to your point that you can never really be prepared, I disagree. If you have a plan, you'll be better prepared to act if something happens.
Thanks for that. In terms of your committee, could you tell us how many persons are there in? And is it just limited to Sofre?
Okay, so for the district disaster committees, it's persons who reside in Sufre, reside and work in Sufre predominantly reside. We have currently a core group of persons who have been there from the time of Simon, may she rest in peace. Simon took on this disaster committee and had been with it and got together a good group of people. So I would say we have a core group of about maybe 15 to 20 people. But right now we're in a recruitment stage because more hands make work light. So we need volunteers, and we need volunteers from all parts of Soufrière. So from Bouton to Anchasne, Conlobet, all around, going all the way across to Fonjoli, because Fonjoli falls within the Soufrière district. Um, we are in the recruitment phase. We open to volunteers year round, but we're trying to see if we can increase our numbers of active persons who are willing to volunteer. It's not a paid position. I don't get paid doing this, never have been. I don't expect to in any case. And if you have a desire just to assist your community, whether it be if you live in Palmis and you want to help just Palmis, that's fine. If you want to help the whole of Soufrière, that's fine as well. But we want persons who have the idea that they're coming to help people, not to help themselves. Um, because I'll put my foot down very quickly on that one. But
So,
there are forms. Sorry, there are
oh, I was just
forms.
about to ask for
Yeah.
persons who
So
are
we have
interested.
for persons who are interested in joining Nemo, we want persons with all different skills, all different skills, whether it be um, office clerical work, whether it be a chef, whether it be somebody who wants to just come and help to clean out or to do disaster assessments or to do some more technical things like electronics or communications or operating a chainsaw. Anybody who has, we need people with all different skills because think of any disaster that you can come up with. You would need persons with all different skill sets to respond. Um, because we know what Sufra is like. Sufra gets cut off very easily, and we need to be able to fend for ourselves until we can get outside assistance. So, the faster you respond in an emergency, the better the outcome. And the forms are the Soufriere Constituency Council office, as has a central location on Bridge Street. The forms are available there to fill them out. You can complete them and leave them right there, or complete them and then hand them to any one of the disaster committee members, and then we will take them to Castries because all the volunteers have to be, their names have to be taken to Castries for it to be gazetted. And actually, we have elections coming up. Um, I think mm, it's coming up soon. I think it's the 13th or the 14th. We have elections first to have our executive reconstituted, to have all positions filled, and that will be held at the Sufer Primary School. I will give you the exact date.
No problem. What are the plans for this organization in 2022 and moving forward? What would you love to see develop?
Okay, so the disaster committee. Okay, so the date is the 14th. Sorry, July 14th, 6 p.m. at the Super Infant School. What would I like to see? Um, the committee locally is supposed to look like what the headquarters Nemo as an organization looks like. So you're supposed to have your executive body, yes, but we need to have subcommittees. So there's a transport committee, for instance, there's a welfare committee, there's a supplies management committee. So um, we I would love to get in enough members so we can fill up these committees, get all the training that is required, and then for us to start doing the outreach and education component to ensure that persons have plans ready. If people have their plans, then we're better positioned to respond to a disaster.
I'm very happy you spoke of plants, given the fact that we're actually in the hurricane season. I think a lot of sensitization, they need to have those things for persons. As much as you may think people would regularly listen to radio or even the television, sometimes there can be so many distractors. So I think if there are, sensitizations, community meetings and stuff, hurricane tips or disaster preparedness, those things, people will quicker gravitate to it as well.
Yeah, so I know companies have taken to promoting disaster preparedness tips, especially the insurance companies or the companies that sell products geared towards disasters. So, I mean, you look and it's out there, but it's for persons to be mindful and take note and actually act on it. Because it's one thing for you to hear an ad or see an ad, but if you don't act on it, it's the ad itself basically falls flat. Um, so there are tips that are all around. I mean, even the directory has tips for disaster. The directory has a hurricane checklist. I know at one point, Aeroline Massey used to give out disaster checklists. They're available for download online, NEMO's website, or if you just Google it, you can find disaster checklists for any and every country that's available. Um, but simple tips, I agree with you. Like if the radio station would air simple tips, like in the event of a disaster, event of a hurricane, what do you do? Make sure your home is prepared, clear your gutters, cut overhanging branches, make sure everything that can fly is battened down, is brought inside, or you dispose of it properly. Um, all those things that make sure you have enough water, you have your food preparation, and don't wait till last minute you hear, hey, a storm coming, let me go and buy what I need. And then you have this mad
This is the
rush
case.
at the supermarkets. If persons prepare, I mean, I remember Simon at one point used to advocate every week, this is what you buy to add to your disaster kit. So week one, you buy a packet of biscuits, not for you to eat, but to put in your disaster kit. Week two, you buy a packet of batteries. Week three, so she had a long list And I think that's something that Nemo promotes. So persons would be ready in the event of any disaster. Um, you need to have enough water to last you 3 days for each person, not for yourself, but for each person at your home. So all these different things that we need to be mindful of, and to when we hear those ads, take note of it. When we see those flyers, take a picture of it so that you have it on your phone if needs be.
Thank you for that. Just a question: what assistance have been given in terms of, have there are a lot of vulnerable persons in the community, and especially in terms of disasters, those persons, I think they tend to get ignored. People don't really remember, especially if they cannot really work on those sort of things. You spoke about different subcommittees, so maybe you can speak to that. If it's the welfare or the transport, what aspect that would really deal with the vulnerable?
So, with our vulnerable population, we're looking at persons who are bedridden, persons who are differently abled. Um, we expect number one that their family would take responsibility for them first and foremost. We have a few instances where you have persons who live alone and they have nobody to care for them. And the social transformation officer has a list of those persons that we would get those lists so that we can check on those persons or have neighbors check on them in the event of anything. Currently in Suffer, we are not in a position for us to open any shelter beforehand. We do not have the supplies that are required in terms of having cots, um, personnel to man the shelter, um, safety equipment, to say you would have your first aid kit and those sort of things. We have the basics, but we're not prepared to say that before a disaster, before a hurricane, for instance, that we know a hurricane is coming, before a hurricane, we can open up a shelter for persons to move into. What we asking persons is to identify a family member, a neighbor, a relative that you can go to if you think your home or where you live is unsafe, so that you can ride out the storm. And then if there's a need for persons after to move, then we can open up the shelter. We have been caught in the past where persons' houses got flooded during events, during the storm, and they needed to move during the storm. And in those cases, we want persons to know where their shelters are. Most of our shelters are government buildings or churches. So for Sufre, the list was just published, and I know it was making the rounds on WhatsApp. I'm sure the station can share that if anybody needs it. But off the top of my head, our number one shelter for Sufre town is the St. Isidore Hall. We have the schools, but if it is a hurricane, we choose not to use the schools because we know the schools are in a flood prone area. In fact, St. Isidore Hall actually got flooded for Thomas and all floods. So St. Isidore Hall in itself is in a flood prone area because if the river breaks its banks by 18th Street, Delia Street, the water goes down that side and it surrounds the St. Isidore Hall. Um, then we have the crisis Diane, so the Catholic churches, um, and the list is available. I can read it out if anybody wants me to. Um, but for those shelters, there are people living close by who have access to the shelters so that they can open it in the event of an emergency. Um, so the schools, as the first point, the caretakers are always there, so they can have persons come in if needs be. But that's the schools have their plan what to do if there's a need for using the school as a shelter. And I think most of the shelters have their plan as well what needs to be done if the building is supposed to be used as a shelter. But we want people to be mindful. If you're going to use a religious building, a church as a shelter, respect the people's church. We do not want a repeat of what happened in Fort Jacques after Hurricane Thomas. And everybody knows what happened. I'm not going to repeat it on air. Respect the people's church. You're being hosted in there. You've been given a place to sleep, to rest your head because your house got damaged. Respect the church. It's that's it. There's I was disgusted and appalled. There's no reason for what happened um, back in 2010 to happen again.
Definitely. In your capacity, do you think enough emphasis has been placed, especially for persons preparing for disasters on the whole. We're not just looking at hurricanes.
Um,
A lot can be done.
a lot can be done, a lot has been done, but I think there's more that can still be done. I mean, you can never stop educating people. You have a new crop of people coming up, reaching the a level of being responsible for themselves and need that wouldn't have no clue what to do. So there needs to be continuous education. I agree. Um, in terms of what more can be done, I would like the public entities to step up, the churches to step up. I mean, it's our collective responsibility to help our community be prepared for anything, whether it be an earthquake, whether it be what if the volcano decides to start acting up in Suffolk, God forbid, knock on wood, where's wood? So um, we need to be mindful that anything can happen at any point in time. Um, and one thing I would like Suffolk people to do is to please, 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 within your groups, contact the Red Cross, contact us, and learn first aid, basic first aid. You know how many lives we have lost because people have no clue about basic first aid? Somebody bleeds to death, whereas one bystander's actions to stop the bleeding or to put pressure on the wound to stop the bleeding could have saved that person's life.
This is where we speak of sensitization, education, outreach, community programs. Even in the schools, you extend it as well, have sessions.
So we can't do everything. Persons need to be realize they need to step up. I mean, it could be your relative, it could be a friend of yours. Step up. If you want to learn basic first aid, within your groups, whether it be your sports club, your church group, your community organizations, anything, you can request training for first aid. And if they ask you to pay, it's a relatively cheap fee to have a skill that could help save somebody's life in the future. So sometimes the trainings can be provided for free, sometimes there's a cost. Um, but if you're in a position that you can do it, I would encourage people to do it because I think we need to have a lot more persons in for training basic first aid.
I agree. 88.5 hours of FM, 20 minutes moving up to the hour of 11 a.m. in Surface and Lucia and the Eastern Caribbean. If you're just joining us today, our house guest, Sonia Cazaubon, Vice Chairperson, Surface Disaster Committee. Just before we narrow down this discussion, I would love for you if there are things you think that are of the necessary that you should touch on as well.
Um, I would just like persons to be prepared for the hurricane season. We are in the hurricane season. It's predicted to be an above average in terms of the number of storms that we expect um, for the entire year. And not all the storms are going to affect the Caribbean region, of course, but we are in a hot zone basically for storms that are crossing the Atlantic. We had a dry run, I would call it, with the system that became Tropical Storm Bonnie. So everybody should realize and know what needs to be done at their homes, with their family members, with themselves to to get ready, so that in the event of a disaster, we are better prepared. And you help yourself, and then you help us as well. So if you're also interested in joining Nemo as a volunteer, feel free to pick up a form at the constituency council office, and we have a meeting coming up on the 14th of July at the Soufriere Infant School, which will be held at 6 p.m. We're going to be electing a new slate of, or re electing in any case, a new executive so that we would get our committees together and get training done. We've already started with the trainings, in fact. So we want to get ourselves up and running and prepared.
Also, on the ground, do you think there is enough networking in terms of disasters, NEMO, the police, and other relevant entities?
Oh yeah, I mean we have our liaisons with every single organization. So with the police, the fire, the hospital, environmental health, infrastructure, we have our network social transformation. So within the community ourselves, we have our core persons, and then we need to get volunteers from each community so that we have a more robust disaster committee.
Although persons are of the view that there is always a break in communication in terms of disasters, sometimes the head doesn't necessarily know what is happening on the other end.
Um, Within the community, no, we have, if you're a member of the community, we have a WhatsApp group. Any information that comes through, everybody has access to the WhatsApp group. If you don't check your messages, you might be very well seeing over 100 messages. Sometimes I hear people complaining, sometimes on the chat, that they haven't read it in a while. And when they look, they have like 40 plus messages to read. So we pass on information very quickly once we receive information from headquarters or within the group. It's passed on in that chat group.
Anything else you'd like to leave with us before we end this discussion and also leave your final comments?
Um, just to implore Suferians in particular, we know we are in a vulnerable community. We're vulnerable to disasters of all types: volcano, earthquake, storms, sea surge, tsunami, you name it, we're vulnerable. So we need to be prepared. We need to be active. We need to take responsibility for our lives and our property. And it takes a community to respond. So we need persons to come together. And disaster response has no political affiliation. We have no political bias. And if that happens, I'm going to take myself out of it, period. I don't affiliate myself with anything political. So persons need to be aware that if they're joining the committee, it's not for them to say, hey, I'm going to look out for one set of people. No, I'm not going to allow that to happen. Um, it's a community, it's ours. We need to take care of it and we need to be mindful of all what happens. And I would like to implore Suferians, please, 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 please. A disaster shows you how vulnerable you are. And we know that water is life. We need to protect our water sources. We need to think of really cleaning up the Sufa River, really cleaning up our act in terms of not just garbage disposal, but all of the other things we dump in the river, from chemicals to oil, etc. We need to take responsibility for that community resource. It's the case of the commons. Anybody has access to it if they would need it, but anybody can destroy it if they choose to. So we need to take responsibility for it and call on people if they see them doing anything that should not happen.
Permit me to ask, as chairperson of the committee on the game during the hurricane season, has there been any desilting of the river or rivers?
Well, government of St. Lucia has a annual program where they desilt rivers. I am aware that desilting is on has been slated, but I'm not sure when those contracts are going to be given out for persons to start actually desilting. Nonetheless, even though the river is not desilted, and I agree because I live by the river, that a river that's not desilted, you're more prone to flooding. The problems we have with the river flooding is when there's um, blockages in the river. So whether you have like boulders or trees blocking the river to dam it up, and then it would break the dam, and then you would have a flood within the flood kind of. Um, we want persons to, if they're debushing, throw it, take your garbage to the dump or compost it even better, but don't just dump things in the river haphazardly. But the desilting works, I am aware, are scheduled and should be happening within this month of July.
Anything else to share with the listening audience?
I think that's about it, unless anybody has any questions or if you have any other questions for me.
Something struck me with the discussion when you made mention of the sea swells or surge. You find a lot of the times when those things are happening, we tend to be very stubborn or maybe even curious to that extent when we go to see what is happening.
I laugh because
All the time it's happening, you.
from I remember like from Lenny, Tropical Storm Lenny, then we've had Dean, we've had Omar. All those systems were wrong way systems. Basically, they crossed over into the Caribbean and then they reversed course and were then going east instead of continuing west. They call it storm surge. We've had persons get sucked through the gutter, sucked through a manhole. We remember one man got sucked through a manhole right by JJB and was needed to be rescued. When persons do those things, they put the lives of others at risk because now somebody has to risk their life to try and save you because of your stupidity. Um, I'm a very clear cut person. I've told people in the past, especially when we've had to pre warn some communities of impending disasters. If they don't take heed, I am not going to ask anybody to put themselves at risk to go and rescue anybody who was being stubborn and did not heed the warnings. We've been very lucky, and solutions might not know that, Suferians might not know that. We actually had a case where somebody almost got electrocuted in the water trying to save people who refused to move, even though we told them that there was going to be sea surges, some swells at Barron's Drive. And when the sea finally came up, then they were screaming, calling for help to help move persons who could not leave their homes. An electrical wire burst, and somebody who was standing by the pole almost got electrocuted. I'm not taking that chance with anybody that I'm responsible for. I'm sorry. If we give you a warning to move and you choose to stay, write it out yourself. My chairperson might have a varying view than I do, and that's Placid Lascaris, but that's my point. I will not risk your life if you, Cabrina, are the volunteer who says, hey, let me try and go. I'm not going to tell you go. I'm going to tell you this is what you're going to be faced with. And if anything happens to you, that is, you take the decision on your own. But I'm not going to tell you go and help anybody when they should have had the foresight to move. So for people, if we ask you to move and you do not move, be prepared to face the consequences of not moving. If we ask you to move in advance and you don't, be prepared.
Even adding to that as well, I'm happy you mentioned Barron's Drive, but that community is exceptional, and it is really well below the coastline as we speak. And in terms of a disaster, they would have to be moved, prior to, if it's free, four
Um,
hours and stuff, and then you would have to look at relocating them. And in the past, we've had some issues in terms of where do you relocate them to. A lot of persons do not want to leave the comfort of their homes.
I wouldn't advocate to relocate in Barron's Drive at all. Barron's Drive is at sea level. Barron's Drive is not below sea level. The whole Suffer waterfront is vulnerable to storm surge because of our bathymetry. Bathymetry basically meaning how the seafloor is shaped. We do not have a sea shelf to talk about. If you go to bathe on the East Coast, for instance, you can walk up to a mile out from the beach. Where the waves reach on the beach, you can walk in the sea up to a mile, and the water will not go past your shoulders. They have a shelf. In Sufre, we do not have a shelf. In Sufre, by the jetty by the police station, that is 60 feet deep. An adult is about 5, 6 feet average. That's 10 times your height. We do not have a shelf so that if we have big waves coming from a tsunami or storm surge, the wave is going to be coming flat, and when it hits the shelf, it piles up. On the East Coast, when it hits the shelf, people will see the wave coming from far. In Sufre, the wave would be coming. When it hits the coast, it's right there. So by the time it hits the coast and it piles up, you in problems already. We can look at predicted storm swells and tell people, okay, we're expecting some storm surge from this system for you to take action in advance. If you do not take action and you want to risk it, it is up to you. We've had a case where the super fishermen, for instance, take their cues from Mystic Man tours. Mystic Man, Mr. Charles, is very proactive. He's like SMMA. They would look at the weather charts. If there's anything coming, he would move his boats in advance and head to Marigot, which is a safe harbor. He would take his boats there because he knows how expensive his boats are and how much of a trouble it is to put them back together if they get damaged. And I realized that the fishermen, they would move their boats if they see Mr. Charles moving his boats. We've had people leave their boats on the water, and then during a storm wants to then paddle out to try and go and bail out water from the boats and then try to bring the boats on shore at Hummingbird Beach, where the swells are normally not as bad as along the southern portion of Suffolk Barron Drive, Margaretwood area. That's not the approach you want people to have. We want persons to be proactive. If we are notifying you ahead, that you take action well in advance. And even the foundation paid for that once. When I notified the foundation years ago, I think you should remove the boards of the jetty. And the then manager told me, "Oh no, but the SLU Met Sinusha Meteorological Office said nothing much is going to happen." I told them, "Remember, our conditions are different from Castries and Beaufort. Yes, the Met predicts for the whole island, but it's not specific to each community." Nothing happened. The storm came, and during the storm, we had the foundation trying to board up the windows on the waterfront. And after the storm passed, then they had to pay for persons to go and dive and retrieve the expensive thick boards off the jetty. So I think you'll have a better plan now. After that incident, you'll now have the shutters on the office, on the waterfront. But yeah, people need to be more proactive. We are in a community that has a lot of interesting geological features that makes it beautiful, but at the same time makes us vulnerable. So we need to take action ahead of time. We need to be prepared so that if something happens, we know what to do.
I'm guessing this is your final comment.
Yes, I would just like to tell everybody, heed the warnings, listen to the local Met Office weather reports. If we've had the habit, if anything happens that's going to affect Sufre, we would go out to the radio stations or go out with a loudspeaker to notify communities in advance. So heed the warnings, be prepared, make sure you have a plan for your home, and let's pray to God that we do not get affected by any severe systems in the coming season.
Just before I leave, if there's anybody who think they have the answer to winning that exciting prize, I didn't forget. I'm seeing smiles. So kindly repeat what the question was. So
What's the
give that
next
person a chance to
name?
win something.
So every year, hurricanes, tropical systems, actually, cyclones are named. So far, we've had a few names already. What is the next name up on that list? So the next system that develops, what name will it have?
Feel free to call us up in here if you have the correct answer. I'm seeing all smiles.
Do you
In
know
the
that answer,
meantime, this is
Sabrina?
where I would say interesting discussion, Ms. Cazaubon, but I think it should be done on a regular as well. And I'm happy the elections are coming up, so I will be seeing more of you for sure to let persons know who the new elect committee members will be.
Definitely.
I know you're quite busy, but then sometimes we have to take from our busy schedule
Oh no,
to present the
I'll make time to
information.
come back on.
Definitely. Any shout outs you want to do, given that opportunity, your family?
Yeah, say hi to all the Kazawans.
I'm sure they heard that. 3 minutes moving up to the hour of 11 a.m. in Surface and Lucia and the Eastern Caribbean. Wonderful discussion today, I must say, as we observe the 2022 Atlantic hurricane season. With me tomorrow will be Mr. Schwayo, Director of the Med Services.
Ah, interesting. That's the next name. You saw it, right?
Unfortunately, the phone hasn't rung. We have to say goodbye to you, but feel free. You can contact Miss Cazaubon on her mobile, that is.
Well, I'll be leaving the prize with you.
Okay, then.
So you contact the radio station with the correct answer, And whoever gets the correct answer will get the prize. It's a water waste tote bag with a t-shirt and a pair of sunglasses.
You spoiled the surprise. You should have just said, I'm leaving it with Sophia FM to be collected. You disclose everything that was in there. Not nice. But this is where we say goodbye to you. Thank you for tuning in. It has been House Guest for today, Wednesday, dated the 6th of July, 2022. A pleasure to have Miss Sonia Cazaubon with me, chairperson. So,
Not chair. Placid is a chair. Sorry about the disturbance. Had to correct you on that one.
designation, please.
A member of the disaster committee. You can say vice chair, deputy.
I blame my superior. She takes the blame, member of the Suffrage Disaster Committee. But thank you so much for being here, gracing us with your presence, and providing this wealth of information. This is where we say goodbye until tomorrow with Mr. Joyeux, Director of the Med Services.
You asked for more live and relevant talk shows, and we heard you. 88.5 Super FM presents House Guest, a brand new, fresh fortnightly feature airing on Wednesdays at 10 a.m. House Guest will showcase a cadre of professionals from doctors and entrepreneurs to the next door friendly neighbor. So tune in as we network the community with a platform for open, frank, and informative discussion. Only on Super FM, your community radio station.
Has the COVID 19 pandemic caused some financial hardship, affected your income, your plans for 2020? Not sure how you can purchase school books and supplies for your children, or undertake the necessary minor renovations to your home for the hurricane season, or even to buy the much needed items for your home? How about fixing your car or paying your home or vehicle insurance? Well, we at the Fontainebleau Credit Union understand these struggles and wish to inform its valued members of our COVID-19 relief loan promotion. Members can get as much as $5,000 at an annual interest rate of 5% with as much as 24 months to repay. Members can call or come into any one of our 2 branches to apply or inquire about this promotion. This promotion ends on 30th October 2020. The Fontainebleau Credit Union. Your dreams, our mission.
As part of the mandate of the Soufrière Foundation to preserve and enhance the attraction sites in Soufrière, 2 garbage bins were placed at the waterfront to accommodate small garbage disposals such as paper plates, plastic cups, bottles, and